January 27th, 2021 BAR large virtual meeting. My name is Jay. What? Yes, what?
Pardon me.
Yep.
I need to make sure that we are indeed recording.
Oh, recording.
Are
Yeah, it says it's
indeed
recording.
Yes,
Yep, I
Are we?
can see
sir,
it.
we are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Oh, yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
Oh, that's right. So my name is Jay White. I'm the acting chairman. Other board members that are present this afternoon are Leon Scott, Luda Subchuck, our new board member, John Robinson, and then Carol Wheeler, who may step in as an alternate. I believe that her alternate services will be needed as James Metters is away today. City staff that are present are Lawrence Courtney, Linda Bennett, somewhere in the background there, and then we're also joined today by our new city architect, Tori Parrish. The order of the meeting will be, yeah, I bet you're saying yay. Y'all needed the support for sure. So the order of the meeting will be as follows. There'll be an introduction and overview by of each project by city staff to the board and to the public. The application presentation will last about 10 minutes or so. I think each of the items on tonight's rather brief agenda are well, they should be succinct, put it that way. If you need more time, then please ask me at the outset of your presentation. But again, brevity is the soul of wit. Any questions of the applicant will be asked by board or staff at the conclusion of that presentation. And then any and all presenters, please clearly state your name for the record. Any persons affiliated with the project, owners, developers, designers, consultants, etc., should speak during this portion rather than during public comment. After the applicant presentation, there'll be an equivalent amount of time devoted to public comment. Again, please clearly state your name for the record so that we can make sure that's captured in the Zoom audio recording. This will be followed by city staff comments and a recommendation, and then a period of about 3 minutes or so for an applicant response to clarify either something said during public comment or the city staff comments or recommendation. After that's concluded, we'll have board discussion and a vote. At this point, the applicant may only clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair, but otherwise there's really no back and forth between the applicant and the board. We have no withdrawn or deferred items. Is that correct, Mr. Courtney?
Right.
Okay, and then please remember to turn off, this seems unnecessary on Zoom, but I'll say it anyway. Please turn off all cell phones and other devices that may be distracting. And also keep in mind, please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning or livability concerns are not the purview of this board, and we can't take any action upon those. All right, Mr. Courtney, you want me to go through the usual sort of virtual board meeting protocols? Yeah, let's skip that because let's stop here. So the way this works, I think everybody's probably familiar by now. Staff controls the PowerPoint that you see on the screen, and that includes everything that was submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants just simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. All applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name before you speak throughout the duration of the meeting. The video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board members or staff, will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. The chat and Q&A functions have been disabled on Zoom. And then during public comment, the applicants, all team members, and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. And just as in an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item they've commented on, just so you know how it plays out. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. All right, so for board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member when voting should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chairman shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chairman if he has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, they will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into an executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. Staff will issue meeting results, including staff comments and board motion, to the applicant following the meeting, and the results are also posted on the city website. There's some other contact and web links there if you wish to garner more information. And then, as a reminder, these proceedings are being recorded. You can watch yourself on YouTube later. All right, Mr. Courtney.
And thank you very much, Mr. White. Soul of wit aside, I'd like to thank the board for all of their hard work and also express this division's appreciation to the applicants, developers, and contractors for all of their patience over the last 8 months. It has been indeed challenging. We are almost back up to full staff, and we can see light at the end of the tunnel now, and hope to be back in full swing soon. So item number 1 on the agenda is a mock-up approval for a piece of the development at 332, 334, and 336 King Street and 36 George Street. Applicant is requesting approval for the mock-up sample panel, which is actually at the rear, the alley side of 334 King Street. It is in no discernible neighborhood in the old and historic district. Some context slides are, this is project here. This is King Street. This is George Street. The alleyway is right here. The mock-up is about down here, and there is parking in the rear behind this. This is the view of 332, the old Bob Ellis store. This is the front of 334 on King, which has been approved for demo and will receive a nice new limestone facade. That's same thing, different angle. This is 336 King. This is 36 George. The alleyway runs like this, and the mock-up and parking are down here at this end. This is looking north on King. The subject property involved is immediately on your right. This is looking south on King. Properties immediately on your left. And if you would, Ms. Bennett, allow Mr. Ramos to unmute himself and his team.
They are unmuted.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Steve Ramos. I'm an architect with LS3P, and speaking on behalf of the owners of the property. And
yes,
Mashburn Construction is the contractor that has built the mock-up. There are multiple buildings associated with this development, and we are specifically going to look at the brick facades that are going to occur right where his cursor is, which is the back of 334 King Street. The brick also wraps around the north facade as well. The mock-up is located where that red rectangle is on this drawing. Next. And so this is the segment of facade that the mock-up represents. It is a brick facade. There is a wood storefront, which is the entrance to the lobby at the ground floor. And then there are steel doors above that. So those 8 openings those are actually steel Juliet balcony doors that swing into the building. And there are also mild steel railings right at those doors as well. The building on the left that you see, that's an existing historic building. Next. These are the drawings of the mock-up panel. You'll see a big red X on the right. Unfortunately, we just had a hard time getting the limestone to the site on time. And in an effort to keep construction moving, we elected to submit just the brick portion. But it should be noted that the limestone occurs only on King Street and it's not visible at the same time as the brick. So we felt like an independent review would be acceptable in this case. Next slide. These are just some of the details of the storefront, as well as a typical head detail at the door. Next. You've got the detail through the parapet on the bottom left. You've also got a jam detail at the storefront. Next. And here's a photograph of the actual model. Just again, brick facade. You've got a wood storefront, and then what looks like a window is actually operable doors. Believe it or not, there's an astragal right in the middle, but they are operable little doors that swing inboard. And then you've got a little copper roof right above the signage band. I want to point out there are a couple things that we are going to continue to look at. The way the railing connects, we weren't overly happy with. Right now, it connects to the jamb of the brick. We're going to look at having some steel tabs that go back into the jamb of the wall to give a better surface for those railings to weld to. So that's just a little detail that we're going to take another shot at. So I wanted you guys to be aware of that. Another one is the actual signage band. Right now, this image shows it's just a flush piece of sapele that's painted. We can't get a piece that's big enough to stretch the entire length of the facade. So, we have designed for there to be battens on that signage band. If you were out at the site yesterday, you saw vertical battens on the panel. And the only thing I wanted to add is that we're going to add a horizontal batten at the bottom of the signage band, right along that corner there. So that was not installed, but after looking at it, it seems incomplete without it. So those are just 2 items that I wanted to point out. But other than that, we're ready to hopefully put brick on the building and keep moving. So we would welcome any comments you have. Thank you.
Okay, you have 7 minutes remaining, so keep talking.
I'm going to use that.
I'm
for
just
another-
kidding. No. No, but any questions of the applicant from the board or staff?
I've got one question. Just, Steve, this is Leon Scott. I just want to back up a little bit to the balcony. And you explained it well, but just again, you mentioned the rail there. Is that connected to the wall itself, to the brick itself, or you mentioned that it was going to be done a little bit differently from what we see here?
Yeah, I don't know if you can zoom in on this photo, but right now you've got little pegs, steel pegs that are actually epoxied into the brick jam.
I got you. Okay.
And it works, but it's not the best connection. And generally you don't want to attach to brick because it is a veneer. So
yeah.
What we want to do is we want to have little steel tabs that actually go back into the building, basically between the steel jamb of the window and the wall. That way the railing can be welded to a piece of steel and not attached to the brick.
Okay.
But the intent would be to make that piece of steel that sticks out as discreet and minimal as possible.
Got it. Great.
It would actually be an angle, and the angle would be attached to the sheathing or the studs behind here. But all you would see is a little tab that stuck out.
Got it. Great. Thank you. That's it.
Sure.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I don't believe we have any public comment on this, do we, Lawrence?
No.
Okay. Well, that simplifies things. We can move right into city comments and recommendations.
Okay. And staff comments include that it is noted that a tumbled brick is being used, which often results in joint widths appearing to be not uniform, and this is especially noticeable at the head joints, which are occasionally much wider. Recent experimentation on other projects has shown that this may be avoided by slightly recessing or tooling the joints. Staff is confident that working with the applicant and his mason, that in working with the applicant and his mason, more uniform joint widths may be achieved. This may also help to differentiate this brick wall from adjacent and nearby historic walls. Secondly, sealant at brick control joints around windows and doors and at lintels, and any exposed flashing in the wall should be the generalized brick/mortar blended color, which is the color that you see when you step back from the wall 15 or 20 feet and squint your eyes. This color may also be used for any MEP items occurring on the wall, which should be inconspicuous. The limestone mock-up is not being reviewed as Mr. Ramos explained, because he was unsure of when it would be ready. When discussed most recently, it apparently is farther along than anticipated, and may be submitted for review as early as the next board meeting, maybe. Hardscape paving, brick piers, and a representation of fencing ironwork need to be shown at the final completion of all mock-up components. And with that, our recommendation is for approval of the 334 King Street mock-up with staff and board comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Courtney. Any staff, or sorry, applicant clarification?
No, that was clear. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Board discussion or a motion?
This is Leon Scott. I'd like to make a motion for approval of the 334 King Street mock-up with staff and board comments.
Can I make a comment beforehand? Maybe because we haven't had any board comments yet. Maybe.
Yeah.
I think I would be on the same page with you, Leon. I just wanted to mention that the only two questions I actually had for Steve was regarding the railing and regarding the two battens that you had. So thanks for the clarification already. It was drawn as a nice detail, the railing attachment, but it seemed to have missed the mortar joint a little bit. So your suggestion sounds good. I think it would be good to see. Generally, all the materials are of good quality and nice craftsmanship. It's generally a nice building. I thought the battens as well, if you have a horizontal batten or if those battens continue at the soffit, I don't know how you treat the soffit. There should be a finished touch, and I like your suggestion there as well, Steve. And in terms of, I think city staff has mentioned that only a portion of the mock-up is being proposed here, and typically the board doesn't like to approve partial mock-ups, but I think in this case it is acceptable because it's two different facades, basically two different buildings. So that's all the comments I had. It looks good.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or a second to the motion that's on the table?
This is John Robinson. I'll second the motion.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion that's been made and seconded for approval of the 344 King Street mock-up with board and staff comments. All right, I'll call the roll. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote?
Yay in favor?
All right, Ms. Wheeler.
Yay in favor?
All right. All right, so Mr. Scott.
Yay in favor?
Okay. And then Mr. Robinson.
Yay in favor.
I paused there because I almost asked for the same vote twice. It's been that kind of a day. And the chair votes likewise. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
And the second item on the agenda is number 2, Wharfside. They are requesting installation of inoperable windows at stairs and east units instead of the operable windows that were approved. It is not in a discernible neighborhood. It's Lawrence Place condos circa 1999 in the old and historic district. Some context photos. This is Calhoun here. The harbor is right here. This is Gadsboro Park, and the condos are right here. This is a view from the south, showing the harbor and the condos. Mainly where they're interested in replacing operable with inoperable windows are at stair towers around the complex, and mainly on this east facade right here on the harbor. This is a view from the north, and board comments at final included one board member said that they appreciated details on the plans, and one said that they don't think that the window is clunky. If it's heavy, it will add to the substance of the building. Staff comments at that time were that this is essentially an in-kind replacement of the project, addressing the remediation of water intrusion issues, and that care is to be taken to maintain profiles to match existing, and that the window looks very clunky in the photo, and that the applicants should seek an alternative which better matches the existing. Staff's recommendation at that time was for final approval with board and staff comments with final review by staff. So with that, Ms. Bennett, if you would let Mr. Tepke and his team unmute themselves, then we can hear the presentation.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Dave Tepke with SKA Consulting Engineers. I'm here with Eric Couch, who's the designer of record for this window replacement and stucco repair project. And I'll kind of move fairly quickly through it because I think Mr. Courtney summarized things pretty well on the front end. And so if Lawrence, do you think I should share my screen to do my presentation, or would you like to control that yourself?
Let's just, if you would just let me know.
Sure.
What sheets do you need?
I think with your introduction, we could probably skip ahead to slide 15 because I think that your pictures were very representative, and also your description of the previous board discussion in September was great. And so I think, see if you could skip to slide 15.
I don't have numbers on those.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead and skip to the slide. Well, I'll just start here. This is the east inside courtyard. Can you skip to the next one, please? And keep wheeling through. These are just some pictures of the windows from different vantage points on the north elevation here. And so as previously discussed, we were at the BAR in September to request approval to repair essentially water damage, stucco repairs, replacements of the coatings, etc. Skip to the next, please. Skip to the next. Skip one more. There we go. So as we look at the existing windows, we can see that they are single hung windows. Skip to the next, please. And these are just some additional photos of the windows around the building. Skip to the next. So previous resolution at staff level is we had a Conair window that we had brought to the board prior, and there was some comments regarding some trim that would make it more architecturally feasible. And so we switched to a YKK model. Skip to the next, please. And so this was the previously approved operable window at staff level with trim. And as you can notice, it's a single hung window. Skip to the next, please. However, the subject of this request is that the owners have requested that we move to inoperable windows, as Mr. Courtney has mentioned, at essentially the stair locations and the eastern facing balconies and window walls. These are inoperable units of the same essential manufacturer with the same coatings, the same grade of window, and the data sheet has been provided as part of the presentation and the request. Next, please. So this, as you can see, the primary difference between the inoperable and the operable window is the sight line at the center of the window, where essentially there's no offset. Next slide, please. The locations that this is being requested is at the stair towers, which I have highlighted there on the drawings on the left and in photo on the right. And this is on the west elevation, which is the street facing elevation. Next. Next photo, please. Okay. There are no requested areas on the north elevation because there are no stairs. Next. The south elevation has 3 locations similar to the one shown in the picture above the drawing details. Next. And then on the east face, which faces the harbor, the request is to replace the operable windows that were previously accepted and discussed and modified on staff level with the inoperable. Next photo, please. So this is essentially the comparison between what's existing, the operable and the inoperable. And so here on behalf of the owners to request that they be permitted to replace those windows at those locations with inoperable and compared to the operable. And I would be happy with Eric Couch, who is the designer of record, to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board or staff? I have one. I was sort of curious. What's the what predicates this request? Is it maintenance driven or financial, or what would you say?
Primarily maintenance driven. There is a desire to have essentially less operable parts, particularly on those east facing elevation closest to the harbor there.
We were also able to obtain a higher performance rating on the fixed on the inoperable window compared to the single hung. They have a higher overall rating, structural and water resistance, and that appealed to the owners.
Okay.
I have one question for the fixed for the non-operable window that you see on the right. Is that an internal divider, or is it a simulated divided light, or
It is
external?
Well, they have 2 options. We can do an external divided light. It's just a piece, I guess, that gets adhered to the glass, or we can do internal. That has not been finalized, and we're open to either option. We believe the external is currently what's being considered, because it does provide a little bit more of a shadow line on the bottom glass, which is kind of what you get with the single hung window, since the top piece of glass is outboard at the bottom.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any
This
other
is Luda
questions?
Silkchuk.
Yeah.
Yeah, quickly. So this, can it be 2 panes actually? So it's a little bit more shadow rather than this kind of plastic application? That's what question number one. Number two, the east elevation, the windows are marked a large one. What spaces are behind it? You don't need a ventilation in those spaces? Natural ventilation I'm talking about?
They're residential units. Is that what you're asking? What's on the other side of the windows? Those are residential homeowners, individual homeowners units.
Okay, and you are providing the fixed windows there? That's
They
what
have-
you're saying?
Those owners of that stack specifically requested those particular windows be inoperable if allowed by the BAR.
Okay. And question number one, about the truly divided panels, panes on the window?
There is an option.
Can you do that?
There is an option to have two separate pieces of glass with a center mullion divider, and we looked at the cut sheet for that, but the glass panes are still in the same plane vertically, and we didn't feel that there was much of an advantage to the double pane, but we can definitely look back into that and to see if there's a more of a sight line compared to the external, I guess you call the fake mullion.
It's just personal look at it. It's up to board and stuff, but that's it. Thank you.
I had
Yeah,
one question sort of following up to that. Oh, Tori, go ahead. Sorry.
My question was just to follow up, and can you give us the depth on that spacer divider bar, the external, the one that's applied externally?
Yeah.
I don't have that in front of me here, and I apologize for that.
We could provide that to staff. I don't think we have it with us.
I don't have a dimension on that at this time.
So I had a question to ask whether y'all had investigated configuring the single hung window with the bottom sash fixed.
We have, and you can lock the bottom sash in place so that it is inoperable. But what you still maintain the same pressure rating, the DP rating, and that was one of the requests of the homeowners on that east facing. They've been having the worst leak issues, especially that top unit. And so that's one reason they thought the inoperable would be better for them, was the fact that they get that higher performance rating. But yes, we could lock the single hung in place.
Yeah. What sort of DP rating are you getting with the currently approved window?
The current one is an AW 65. And obviously the architectural windows, you take 20% of the design pressure compared to a normal window, which is 15%. So that it performs, an AW 65 performs like I guess like closer to an 80 or a 70 normally. And I believe, I don't have the information here.
So it's a pretty high performance window in and of itself.
It is, yes.
Certainly higher performing than what you're replacing.
Correct.
Which
100%.
is pretty obvious. Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board or staff? All right. Hearing none. I don't think we have any public comment on this item either. So let's go right into city staff comments and recommendation.
Okay.
May I ask one of your questions I didn't have an answer for a second ago, real quick?
Sure.
The performance rating on the fixed window is an AW 100. So it's
Okay.
significantly higher than the pool home.
Okay.
Okay, and staff comments include that the board previously reviewed this as a fundamentally in-kind replacement remedial project. The board gave final approval for replacement of the exterior materials and included staff comments to better match existing windows. Applicant is now proposing something which goes beyond simple in-kind replacement, and staff is bringing this back for the board for review of the proposed inoperable windows. And staff has worked with the applicant to find a suitable replacement for the existing operable windows which meet the requirements for this location, although we would ask if the intermediate horizontal rail can be made to protrude a bit more from the face of glass to create an increased shadow line. We were of the understanding that that was a true intermediate horizontal rail. The viewing angles are varied, but the majority of the inoperable windows will only be visible from the harbor side or from a distance. Staff's recommendation is that due to limited visibility of the inoperable windows in the location shown, staff recommends approval with previous and current staff and board comments.
Thank you. All right, a few minutes for any sort of applicant clarification. All right, looks like that's a no. So we'll go on to, oh yeah.
I apologize. I found the dimension that was requested on the
Okay.
piece. It's the mutton grid, which gets adhered to the exterior, it protrudes off the glass 3/8 of an inch.
Okay. Sort of like a typical exterior set storefront situation.
Correct. And I'm looking,
Okay.
and the detail for the actual mullion, it's actually about the same dimension. The glazing pocket is outboard, and it has between the piece of metal and the gasket, you're looking at maybe a 1/2 inch compared to 3/8. So it's not significantly a big difference.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to board discussion. Thank you for that. Well, I can sort of lead this one off a little bit. I understand, you know, for a homeowner to be going through such a invasive surgery on their house to rectify a condition like this, I understand wanting to maximize one's investment. My only concern is that, you know, moving to a fully fixed window, whether it's a truly divided light or a simulated one, does flatten the window significantly without the offset of the sashes. And considering that you've got these two window types nearly side by side, despite the fact that most of them face the harbor, I'm a little concerned about that. You know, Charleston has always been known for the way its buildings meet the rivers, meet the harbor. And I don't want to have this project, having the effect of flattening the facade even greater. So that's a concern for me. I mean, I would think that you could improve on an already fantastic window by fixing that sash entirely, and that would especially make sense in the stairwells where there's nobody monitoring whether the windows are open or not. But I would think that the AW65 performance seems, if that's what the adjoining or the adjacent windows are providing, then armoring this facade is not really going to protect the building as a whole. And I think it has a detrimental effect on the in-kind replacement that we approved back in September.
I'll just add a little bit. I wasn't at the September meeting, so it's the first time I see this. I definitely agree with you, Jay, that suddenly changing the window from one elevation to another, just because it faces the harbor, doesn't really make sense to me. When I looked at the elevations and the proposal of changing the window type in the stairwells would make sense to me because it's recessed, or that would be okay, I think, because there's a certain system or concept behind that. But the facade at the harbor is still visible, and I don't see a reason for that, especially if the existing or if the new window would be still a high performance window.
Okay.
This is Luda Subchuk. I also support that notion. It's kind of really plasticky. Besides it is plastic already, but and it just doesn't fit the rest of the building, regardless what point of view those windows are, and particularly when it's in living spaces. So I don't know. I'm just concerned. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson or Scott, any comments?
I have no comments.
All right.
None for me at this time.
Do I hear a motion then?
Luda or others, is everybody on the same page as Jay that you would not approve an inoperable window anywhere on the building?
I'm in agreement with that.
Because there were two locations. One is at the harbor side and the other portion covers the stairwells.
Well, again, if Jay said that if it's inoperable, maybe the fixed bottom pane, so it becomes inoperable, but still it's a configuration of the single hung. There's kind of two things, inoperable, but in the same time, the window configuration.
I mean, I would think probably, what I would, if I wasn't sitting in this chair, what I would probably move is that the applicant retain the previously approved single hung design and fix the bottom sash as desired, so long as it had no aesthetic effect.
Right. So I guess the motion is, keep the previously approved single hung with fixed bottom pane window as an non-operable.
Okay, so that is a motion to keep the previously approved single hung window, but instead with a fixed sash.
Correct.
Okay. Motion made by Ludo. Do we have seconds?
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Okay, great. All right, let's call the roll. Mr. Robinson.
Aye, in favor of the motion.
Okay. Ms. Wheeler.
Aye, in favor.
Mr. Scott.
Yeah, in favor.
Ms. Subchuck.
Yay in favor.
Okay. And I vote likewise. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And the third and last item on the agenda is 20 Romney involving 4 buildings at Foundry Point. The applicant is requesting approval to paint buildings 1, 3, 4, and 5 at the Foundry Point complex. This is not rated, it's brand new. It's in no discernible neighborhood. It's circa last year or the year before, and it is in the historic corridor district. This is Romney, and this is Morrison. Romney turns into North Romney right here. Brigade is right here. The parcel that we are looking at is right here. It at first was known as Charleston Steel Phase 1. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Monroe and his team.
Everyone, Lawrence asked me to have the ownership team, Middle Street Partners, Adam Monroe, and our one of our consulting engineers, Dean Rolita, to talk a little bit about why this request is being made, and then I'll follow up with sort of the how. So I'll turn it over to Adam.
Sounds good. Can you guys hear me? I'm not seeing myself on the Zoom here.
Yes.
We see you and hear you.
We see you.
Okay. All right.
Nice ceiling fan.
Yeah, I had to go hide in my house to take this. So appreciate everyone's time and consideration of this agenda item here. By way of background, this project was constructed in 2019, late 2019, through spring of 2020. So I think we finished construction on the last building there on Romney Street sometime around April of 2020. And some background as to what is behind this request. In spring of last year, we became aware of some issues with the buildings that were related to the through wall scuppers in the roofs having a defect. Basically, there was no welded seam along the entire run of the scuppers, which several large rain events revealed a pretty large bulk water issue for the buildings, putting a lot of bulk water down between the really both sides of the exterior sheathing, but really on the front side, on the exterior side, between the wall and the brick. We were lucky to find that issue quickly, determine what the remedy was, and go back and replace 30 some odd scuppers throughout the project over the course of several weeks. In doing so, we had several consultants review the remedial work and found another issue after closing the chapter on that, which was not a fun way to end one issue, but we did discover some things that we wanted to look at further. That being the integrity of the wall system relative to the damage sustained by these bulk water issues caused by the scuppers. To make a long story short, we engaged a building envelope consultant who reviewed the condition that we were seeing as we put these buildings back together after the initial issue, and wanted to ensure that we had our bases covered as it relates to long-term durability and waterproof of the wall system. So that's why we're here. We did find some things that need to be looked at and need to be addressed. And so with that, I will turn it over to Dean with SGH Engineers, who is very familiar with the technical conditions that have given rise to this request, and why he believes this is a practical and needed solution for us.
Thank you. I'm Dean Rutala. I'm a professional engineer, and I specialize in diagnosing and solving building enclosure problems like this. Briefly, what I've done, we spent 3 days at the site last August. We focused on buildings 4 and 5, where most severe damage was. I visited about 60 apartments that had evidence of damage. I ran diagnostic water tests to understand what was going on. We had workers that made 8 openings in the masonry in buildings 4 and 5. And we also made openings in buildings 1, 2, and 3. Briefly, the construction that is important here is it's a brick veneer with an air cavity, as is common, a weather-resistant barrier to keep the moisture from in the cavity from getting inside, and then wood frame construction. And what we found is that the damage from the scupper leakage did serious damage to the weather-resistant barrier. It has to be fixed, and that repair in those areas has to be done with brick removal where that damage is severe, and there's just no way around that. The rest of the veneer, it's not in that bad of a shape. It's got some mortar in the cavity. The mortar in the cavity shouldn't be there, as we know. There's spots of mortar. It's not unheard of course, either, but it's holding the moisture. And in this case here, this is a relatively new weather-resistant barrier. The entire assembly is code compliant, modern assembly, but the weather-resistant barrier is a newer product, and it's not as robust as the products that I've used for years, and many of you are familiar with, I'm sure. And it's more sensitive to this moisture in the cavity. And yeah, it's important that we do something about that now to really get the expected life out of the building and stop that moisture from getting to that weather-resistant barrier to the same degree it has been getting there. So the paint on building 2 is able to do this. So it's a solution, a technical solution that will address this combination of a bit too much mortar in the cavity and a bit too weak of a weather resistant barrier, so we can get the life out of this building out of these buildings that they should get. That's really a summary of what led me to this conclusion.
And I would just add to that, I believe Dean would confirm that several clear sealers were attempted prior to reaching this conclusion.
That's correct. And I water tested those, and they did what we would expect them to do. They reduced the water penetration, but they did not do so sufficiently to get durability that needed. And those sealers are just a few months old to get the durability to get the life out of these buildings that one would expect.
So I can kind of run through the concept of the paint scheme that we've put together for this. As those of you who were around when this project was approved, this was a project where we were really experimenting with breaking the kind of the typical multifamily mode of, you know, the big Texas donut that takes up the whole site, and really strove to break that down and create more of a campus of buildings. And so rather than one building or two, we ended up with 5. So in the paint color scheme that we're proposing, we're really trying to continue with that idea of a campus, a diverse collection of buildings, rather than sort of paint with one brush. I mean, there's one strain of thought that says, well, building 1 is just painted white, just paint them all white. But we felt like that was probably not the right solution. So we experimented with a whole lot of visual studies of different color schemes, and the one that you have before you is the one where we ended up. And I can run through it very briefly for you. Lawrence, if you would advance me to building 1. And there we go. So this is the color scheme for building 1. As you can see, all these are sort of related neutral colors that sort of work in the same general bandwidth, but some tend more warm, some tend more cool, some tend more red. The one for building 1, as you can see, we have a wider accent color inside of the space around the pilaster, or the space around the larger openings, and that's in keeping with the original concept for the building, where that was a lighter color. But we decided to lighten the whole building up. We felt like this building, because of its size, we actually felt like this actually was a bit of an improvement from the darker color scheme that it has now. What isn't clear, and I apologize on our presentation, is that this building sort of has bookends, as you can see, and then an infill space in the middle. That infill space in the middle is envisioned as having the same color as the main body color, but double pigment of it, so that those in-between sections recede a little bit and are a bit darker, and the bookends are a little bit lighter. And then we have another slightly lighter color for the pilasters at either side of the large openings. Next. Here you see that in a photo simulation with the building, and you can see the existing condition down in the lower left-hand corner. And you can also see here that accent, this building has brick bands that run across at the sill lines, and we're also bringing that accent color along those brick sills in the spaces between the bookends. Next. It's building 3, the building with the large arch. We had the option in arranging this color scheme to either paint or not paint the bases of the buildings, because the bases are solid masonry construction. That's where the podium is. So the weep is above the base. So that's the option we took with this building. So again, we have in all cases, the channeling and the windows remain the same color. We have a body color and a slightly darker accent color for the arch, the cornice, and the heads over the windows. Next. And again, there's a photo simulation of those colors applied to the building. And as you can see, you have the unpainted base, and then the lighter body color and darker accent at the head, sills, and the arch and cornice. Okay, next. Building 4, I should say building 4 and 5 are identical. They are just opposite mirror images of one another, but we decided to opt to paint them 2 different colors just to push the diversity of the palette a little bit further. So this is the color scheme for building 4. Again, you've got in this case, a darker body color and a lighter accent for the arches and window heads. And again, in this particular case, we are leaving the base unpainted. And there's a photo simulation on the next page. Oh, actually back up one, because I guess we did building, yeah. So then, and then building 5, which has a much sort of a warmer reddish tinted neutral color for the body and a lighter color for the arches. And again, the base on that building, we will remain unpainted. And then we have a photo simulation. So we have a few angles of this building. Yeah, there we go. So that's building 5 in that warmer reddish tinged paint scheme. And then you can see building 4 just beyond it in that more almost greenish neutral tone. And next slide. That's building 2 in the foreground. That building is painted already. It was painted as a part of the project. So painted brick has certainly been a part of this palette for a long time. And yeah, I should say it's it was built to kind of feel like an evolutionary project, like a sort of an industrial site that had been re-inhabited. And we did take a close look at some of the buildings in the Navy Yard that are painted brick and painted stucco to kind of get some ideas about these color schemes. All right, next. Oh, yeah, and this was one that I just thought was a very helpful one, because at least you don't get building 1, but you get all the rest of them in some measure, and you get a sense of the whole composition with the colors all working together. Next. Nope, I guess that's the end.
Okay, great. Any questions from the board or staff?
Carol Wheeler, I have a question, just so I understand that right. Are you proposing that the new paint will be basically another layer of waterproofing, or help to waterproof the entire building? And is that basically then your first line of defense? And are you closing any brick vents on that facade, or how does that work?
No, actually, we wouldn't be closing any of our weaves. We would certainly want those to remain. And yes, you're correct. It is to give us a first line of defense against moisture coming in. It's not elastomeric paint or anything of that nature. It's regular paint. I'm out of my lane when I say this a little bit, but I just know from my discussions with Dean that when they opened up the wall in building 2, it was powder dry relative to the other buildings. And so we felt like that extra layer really did make a difference for building 2, and would for the others as well.
Yeah, Dean can speak to that, but we investigated 2 just as a control, the white building there, and it was day and night different in terms of what the findings were. So the paint appears to be the very good barrier in this instance.
Yeah, if I may, the key is that building 2 has the same weather resistant barrier. It has the same mortar in the cavity, and just the performance is night and day. And that really is the what creates the opportunity here.
Well, I should also mention that the scupper leaks that were talked about earlier are going to necessitate several veneer removals from the scupper down to the podium. So there's going to be some scarring on the buildings, and that's just another factor in a decision to paint them. I'm not sure we're going to ever get it put back exactly where there's no trace of those repairs.
Well, I have a host of questions, but they're all building science related and really beyond the purview of the board. It's really unfortunate that y'all got here, but I'm curious, and this is only marginally germane, but was the brick itself ever studied to see if it met specification?
I can speak to that. I did not do any testing of the brick, but I've been pulling brick masonry apart for a long time, 40 years. And there's nothing about this brick masonry other than the mortar in the cavity that would cause me to, spend owner's money doing tests. There is no issue with the brick masonry. Water doesn't get through it anytime, it takes an hour or so for water to get through it, which is what you would expect for a well-built assembly. There's just nothing that caused me to see it as an issue, or I would have pursued that, but it's a great question.
Okay, well, so the paint that you're specifying, is it just a acrylic house paint? Like what is it? Is it a masonry coating specifically?
Building 1, I believe, if we're using that same spec, is just exterior paint, designed for brick, designed for masonry. So it's not exotic.
Okay. All right. I mean, like I said, I have a million questions, but they're for another day. Any other questions from the board? Okay, we have no public comment, so let's proceed to the city staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. White. Staff comments include, although it is still somewhat unclear as to what has caused the water intrusion issues, staff has been assured that applicant has explored and exhausted all means of addressing these issues and proposes this painting as a last resort. And while painting brick is generally not viewed by staff as a good idea, staff acknowledges that what is being proposed is not simply a cheap fix, but it's in fact a costly effort to mediate issues while preserving the originally proposed aesthetic of the development. And staff has no concerns about the proposed color palettes either. It should be noted that while the buildings on this project have received final approval with conditions, various site work items remain unresolved. Staff's recommendation is that while it is highly unusual and regrettable that these new brick veneer buildings need to be painted for these reasons, staff is convinced that applicant believes that this is his only recourse and that it will indeed resolve the issues. This being the case, staff recommends approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cordy. Applicant's clarification?
No, none.
Okay, great. All right. So board discussion.
This is John Robinson. I would just agree with staff comments, and I share the chairman's concerns about how we got here. But I do believe, as staff has said, that this is the best and expensive, costly, and after due diligence, best outcome possible to resolve the issue of the longevity of this building through aesthetic change. So I would support it.
This is Leon Scott. I'm in agreement as well with staff comments and recommendations.
This is Carol Wheeler. I'm not sure if that's really the best way to move forward, because I would be concerned that you you would trap moisture now even more between the exterior paint layer and the water resistive barrier. Because typically the brick is porous and the water can get out of the building, but now you still have a cavity. So I don't know if this is just a short or a temporary fix, and you might have to get back in a couple of years and take the brick veneer down anyways. I'm not too knowledgeable about that, but there would be a concern that it doesn't seem like a real fix, a proper fix. And in terms of the scarring that occurred, you could obviously always stain the brick or whitewash the brick and then still keep the texture with the paint. Once you paint the brick, the texture goes away, and you don't see any difference between the brick and the mortar anymore. So there would definitely be a concern. I'm fine with the color palette and it looks good, but I'm not sure if that just pushes the problem out a few years.
This is Luda Sobchuk, and I'm in support of what Kara just said. It's kind of strange that paint will take care that issue with water infiltration through the porous brick if it's not the elastomeric paint, which is basically blocks. But and again, if they were looking at the mortar accumulation at the cavity in one place or another, but if it's throughout, it seems like no resolution there unless the whole veneer is replaced. But so again, it's concern, and it's probably in a few years we will be looking at that repaint again. But it's really hard for us to determine, since the professionals have been looking at that and recommending this paint. Everything what I'm doing right now is expressing my concern. And I guess I will go along with the staff recommendation, but with the caution. Thank you.
Yeah, I will admit that I've had a hard time wrapping my head around the notion of painting this veneer and solving a severe moisture intrusion issue. But I mean, we have to, as board members, we have to take the expert opinions that are provided here essentially at face value. And our scope is really, do we like the colors? And we could deny painting it at all, but based off what I've heard, I don't think that's really a viable option for us to consider. I agree with staff's recommendation here. I think this is probably one of the craziest situations I've seen, and the board is seeing, as y'all are probably well aware, the board is seeing more and more multifamily projects return to the board soon after completion with envelope issues. I mean, it's rare for me to be nearly speechless, but you done it. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the painting of the building in the proposed color palette, subject to staff comments and recommendations.
Okay, so the way I might render that is a motion for approval with staff comments.
Right. Thank you. It's a correct restatement, or more accurate statement.
Just try to use fewer words somehow or another. All right. So motion for approval with staff comments. Do I have a second?
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Okay. Go down the roll. Ms. Sobchuk, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
Ms. Wheeler.
Yay, in favor.
All right. Mr. Scott.
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Robinson.
Yay, in favor.
And I vote yay in favor. The motion carries 5-0. All right, best of luck.
Thank you all.
All right, that's the end of our agenda, so I am going to sign off. Everybody have a good evening. Oh, wait, no, Lawrence, you wanted to
Yeah, I
talk to
think
us. Yeah.
Lawrence had, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I've got a few housekeeping items, if you guys don't mind. I see that there are still attendees on the line, but then that's fine. We're not doing anything.
Yeah, as long as we're here, we're still in session.
secretive here, so that's fine. I want to see how Ms. Robinson is feeling about when he might be interested in assuming the reins here.
I would be glad to do so at the either the next meeting or the meeting thereafter. I'm getting my sea legs, so to speak, so I feel I'll be up to speed with just a little more time.
Okay, well, then what I'm basically hearing is that perhaps at the end of the next meeting, we can vote on a chairman. Is that accurate?
That would be fine with me.
Okay.
Oh,
yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Secondly, we have an issue involving long lead time on materials. And really, it's nothing entirely new. We've been hearing this for years. Windows and brick, they're both long lead items, and everybody wants to get those pinned down and get board approval on those as quickly as they can. Well, that has now been exacerbated by the pandemic and by supply chain disruptions and long lead times. And we now have numerous applicants who are really wanting to get especially brick and some windows and brick approved by the board before their mock-ups are ready, just to meet their schedules. So I wanted to get y'all's feedback on that. I think that we at staff have a plan that would enable that to comfortably happen, which I can describe. But first, I want y'all's input on whether you think that that is something that you would entertain and be comfortable with.
So what's happening is that beyond just the usual sort of late arrival of these products to the sample panel, there's also developers or building owners are now saying that they're facing supply chain disruptions, and it's even worse.
Right, and I think it's believable on most counts. Yes.
So I know that this has been an issue that all the review boards in Charleston, BAR small, BAR large, and design review board have faced this for a number of years now. It seems like It seems like it's a rarity that a project team or a construction team has a sample panel ready in a timely fashion. I struggle with that because I know, I know how general contractors tend to sequence the work, and I have observed in my own professional life plenty of occasions where it just seems like whoever is producing the schedule is not taking into account the significance of the sample panel review and the fact that you really have to plan ahead for that. I would be concerned about making too many tweaks to what we typically allow without opening up Pandora's box. I mean, I'm sure that y'all spent a lot of time considering this. I often wonder if we have, if our sample panel requirements are too elaborate to begin with, because I have some understanding of the cost associated with building a mock-up for BAR. Now, in the scope of a multi-million-dollar project, it's not that big of a deal, but you're still throwing $80,000 into Bees Ferry landfill at the end of the project. So maybe that's part of what y'all are considering, but I would be pretty nervous to change it too much, even in present circumstances.
Wasn't it in the past that, I agree with what you're saying, Jay, wasn't it in the past that you kind of got a brick pre-approved and also the window pre-approved at the preliminary level? I feel like there was a couple of years ago, or maybe that was before the mock-up panels became really a requirement, but that gave, I remember people would come with a window to the preliminary review and smaller mock-up, brick mock-up panels. I don't know if that would help with the ordering, but obviously the idea of the mock-up is that you see everything together. So that might change things. And I guess the idea is to minimize also the number of times the BAR has to go out to the mock-up. So you don't want to start having two phases, one for the material ordering and one for the installation. I guess if that's, I don't know if that would be an option to approve at least a window a little earlier. Or,
this is Luda. I kind of echoing Kara's as well here. You know, the mock-up panels, not just material, but we're really looking at the workmanship and the detailing and all that. So if the brick, we're all familiar with, and we can look at the bricks at the sample panels and things like that, and if we can pre-approve, and I guess same for window, is just when we look at the mock-up panels, it should be more about workmanship, which we constantly have an issue with that rather than with material itself, I think. So if we can help out with two-step material approval, maybe we can consider that. Just my opinion as architect, you know, yeah. Because I had the same issues, obviously, on some projects. And yes, notoriously brick and windows or storefronts, they're always lagging.
And the other option is to send a clear message, because it is almost all of the time a scheduling issue. That it hasn't been, you know, the mock-up hasn't been, they haven't started the mock-up early enough. You just, or you get deferred the first time and you need to be approved then. But if you send a clear message out and keep on deferring, or have a clear BAR message, I don't know if that would change things.
I agree with Caroline that, and Lawrence, please feel free to tell me if we're wrong on this, but if the perception is in the industry that schedulers or other design professionals are not taking the creation of the mock-up seriously enough or understanding the amount of time that goes into it. Maybe that's something that the BAR clarifies in its messaging at the outset with any project, is that nothing's moving forward until we have this mock-up, and you need to understand how essential and central it is to whatever we ultimately approve.
Oh, and that point is driven home repeatedly along the process, and I think everyone out there building has heard us hammer on them for years now. The mock-up has to be perfect. Just I mean, we bluntly say the mock-up needs to be, in Mr. White's words in one meeting, it should be the best work on the site, because everything follows from it. So it should be the gold standard. The problem goes back in my mind to scheduling, and I think there's two separate things at play here. One is this temporary short-term event that has been largely caused by circumstances which may or may not be within the applicant's control. And the second is how we approach this issue going forward in a reasonable way, where we're not recurringly dealing with it. So I would advocate that we err on the side of leniency during these dramatically different times, and show a little mercy here at the risk of being steamrolled later on, and then put into place a very clear system whereby long lead items must be approved at, say, preliminary phase or final phase. But point is, applicants don't have to wait until the whole thing's until the mock-up has been approved just to get a brick sample approved or a window approved.
Oh, I mean, there's something to that, because I'm just thinking of how many occasions in the 8+ years I've been on the board that we've actually changed the brick color or pattern at the mock-up, and it has happened. Although I've often been somewhat uncomfortable about that, because when I first started presenting the BAR, the materials were fully vetted at the board level, and then the craftsmanship was judged during the mock-up review. That goes back a long time. I'm sorry, what was that, Lita?
Yeah, go ahead. No, and I just was saying that's exactly what I was saying. That's kind of material versus workmanship, craftsmanship, and so if we can do the two-step and help those projects moving forward in these times, it's just my opinion. I think that's what you're saying, correct, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, that's how it once was, and I'm trying to think of a way that would that would allow us to do this without opening floodgates for all manner of hijinks. Because those little practices, they weren't really policies of the board; they were just habits and practices dated from a time when there was a lot less development pressure on the city. There were a lot fewer large buildings. There were fewer materials being used in any one proposal. You know, we have a lot of projects now that we see that their facades are composed of upwards of 5, 6, 7 materials in some cases, and picking and choosing what constitutes long lead is kind of tough. I don't know. Lawrence, have y'all sort of drafted a specific proposal, or were you just sort of hoping to have a little bit of a roundtable discussion?
I have got one in the back of my head. I've been asked to have this discussion with you guys before I move forward, but basically it would simply be a proposal to deal with the several that we have now in a certain fashion, and then deal with future ones at maybe at preliminary level. Have the applicants ask the board for approval of what they regard as long lead items, and really the only ones that we have seen, and since I've been here 5 years now, are windows and brick. So if we can begin to pin that down in the future, but at preliminary, we're almost virtually assured of getting something that everybody can agree on at final.
Well, it's aggravating as a board member to see the process sort of lose integrity when you show up to a site visit to see a mock-up and the mock-up's not complete. But what's even worse from a process point of view is to show up to look at a mock-up that maybe isn't right yet those materials are already hanging on the building. And that has happened in a few places, and that is a really inappropriate position for an applicant to put the board and city in, because we know the implication of denying or rejecting any part of the mock-up.
Well, and the applicants are told, and they know that if they do so, they are doing so at their own peril.
Yeah. Yeah. We had that very situation, Spring and King.
Really?
Half the facade was built, and there we are staring at the mock-up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'd be open to what the city might recommend. I think,
okay,
you know, keeping in mind that that we'll just watch for the loopholes. I guess that's what I would say, is just watch for ways in which the integrity of the review process could be degraded. And I think all the board members that have spoken, I think we're all in agreement that you know, what gives us pause with mock-ups more frequently than anything else is the level of workmanship or the absence of it. And it's rare and not typically necessary that we tinker with material choices at mock-up review.
I think that the biggest thing we look with the brick actually is the mortar joints and the color and, you know, installation. So the brick as brick probably can be what Lauren said, preliminary pre-approved, but then we're still looking at the final mock-up for the installation and mortar joints and color and, you know, integrity of that. So
I mean, I
don't
think
know,
everybody's,
trying to help.
no, I kind of hear everybody sort of saying the same thing, is that the mock-up is that opportunity to see the materials, uh, and the craftsmanship. You're looking at and approving what it's going to be made of, what it's going to look like, the integrity of the building, and so I think that's a really important part. So I think we're all here saying the same thing. And as Jay said, I'm certainly willing to look at what the city has, and obviously ears open and eyes open for any sort of loopholes. But yeah, I think I think the mock-up is such an important piece because of all that, the materials, the workmanship. I think all that's an important part of. So again, I'm hearing the same thing from everyone, so I'm in agreement with that.
Okay, then is it fair to say that you guys would entertain an outline of two separate procedures, one which addresses several ongoing immediate needs, and then one for a long-term solution to this recurring issue?
I would be fine with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like to me in the long term, when we're back to meeting together at a preliminary phase, looking at samples would be easy. So I think in the long term, it sounds like that's really going back to what you used to do, which was review samples and materials and then later review craftsmanship. Is that correct? So we may just have to be creative in the meantime about how to do that.
As just one question, lately the board, at least BARL, has been tougher on sample panels. Have you seen a result from that, or has it
Absolutely. I recently had Nathan Schutte spend about 3 months without me leaning on him without me calling him or bothering him, with him of his own volition initiating everything himself, after me going out and saying and pointing out several issues and saying to him, look, we either address these or I'm going to have to get the board involved on this. And so he took that to heart and spent a full 3 months getting that mock-up almost rebuilt and right. So yes, they are more and more serious about it.
That's a good thing. That it means it works.
Yeah, I did that myself on one of my projects. They didn't get to board to the staff even to review before I approved. So, but anyway, that's not a. I think, like everybody said, it's mock-up panel is very important. It should be important for the developer, for the GC, for the applicant, for the architect, because you can see or preview what it will be in final result. So anyway, I guess for me, I will try to work on those 2 points. What you're asking for, Lawrence, and
Okay.
see where it will go.
Okay. When do you think you might have something for the board to take a look at?
I,
Or are you about to hit send on it right now?
no, 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 no. I would expect it by middle of next week.
Okay.
Right.
It's very reasonable. I think having something in writing to put in front of us,
Yeah.
we can get some consensus from, or some edits pretty quickly and get that turned around.
Okay.
Okay.
Well-
Well, anything else on the agenda for tonight?
No, that's all. And I would say thank you for your consideration.
No, well, thank you all for the work you're putting into things.
Yep, thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All
All right. You all have a good
Thanks,
evening.
guys.
You too.
You too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everybody,
Thanks, everybody.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right.
I have to stop recording.